Welcome to the Introverted Influencer Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Van Slyke. My soul's mission on this planet is to help fellow introverts grow their online influence in a state of feminine flow and ease. While battling the woes of depression, anxiety, and even mom guilt, I've somehow managed to build a six-figure blog without the use of social media and without sacrificing my mental health. If I can do it, you can fucking too. Hello there. Welcome back to episode 30 of the Introverted Influencer Podcast. So today is a pretty important day for this little podcast of mine because today is the first time I've had an actual guest on the show. I have upgraded from my little jinky cell phone, y'all, and I have got the equipment and I am doing the thing. And the first guest today, her name is Jeana Oldham, and she is a motivational speaker. She is a mother of two really young girls. She is the podcast host of the Abundance Formula podcast. She is an orthotics practitioner by day. She is also a life coach and a trainer. So she's got it going on. And she is hosting an event that I will be a keynote speaker for in November. So I thought it would just be a good idea to have her on. We talk about reconciling mom guilt, time management, how to do scary shit, especially when you're an introvert and you're afraid of being seen. And we also talk about the correlations between the law of attraction and actual scripture from the Bible, which I thought was pretty interesting. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Bear with me. I am getting used to interacting with others and interviewing, but nonetheless, I really hope you find this helpful, and it would mean the world to me if you could pass it along. So enjoy the episode. Hello, Jeana.
Hello, how are ya?
I am a little nervous because you are my very first podcast guest, so I hope that I don't make an ass of myself.
I'm excited. We're friends, so that's always the best thing to start with.
Yes, absolutely. But you are my first guest, and I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so because you are on the Introverted Influencer Podcast, I've just got to ask, do you consider yourself to be an introvert?
So I'd say mine is interesting. I would say I'm an introverted extrovert, which I don't know how many people there are like that, but technically Myers-Briggs I test as an extrovert, but like I definitely get re-energized by myself at the same time. So like, I don't have a problem being with people, and, that doesn't necessarily drain my energy to be with people. Like a lot of like actual introverts, so that would be kind of draining. They could do it, but it's draining. It's not draining for me, but I like to have my alone time. That's really where I refill my soul up. That's where I'll get a lot more of like my ideas and inspiration. Like I got to have some alone time too. And I'm definitely a homebody. So like both my husband and I are technically extroverts, but he and I would rather sit at home and watch a movie with pizza than like go out and meet our friends at a bar and do that thing. That makes us tired. Like I'd prefer smaller groups with more, quality connection than like a lot of people and big stuff. So it's interesting how I'm technically extroverted, but I have a lot of introverted qualities at the same time.
Okay, well, I want to loop back to that a little later on, but for all of our guests, just go ahead and introduce yourself and give us basically the journey of how you are here today as a podcast host, a life coach, personal trainer, and mother. And then on top of that, you do the orthotics thing during the day.
Yeah. So as you said, my name is Gina Oldham, and I grew up out in McDonald, Tennessee. So kind of in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. Wow.
I grew up over there, but then after I married my husband, now I'm kind of out in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, or Hickson, technically a little bit of both. But so grew up in McDonald, Tennessee, always been from Tennessee. Grew up in a small, conservative religious town. And our family was always highly driven. Like every person in our family is very interested in living extraordinarily. Like we don't want to just do anything average, okay, normal, like for whatever reason, whether it's music or it was sports or it was academics, we just all kind of wanted to be extraordinary at whatever it was we were going to pursue. So that was something that was just always in my family, always supported with my parents. So I always kind of was really driven in that sense. From just being a little kid, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And so even like in 5th grade, me and 2 other of my guy friends started a business and we called it We Three Strings. I played the violin, we had a pianist, and the other played the hammered dulcimer. And so we went all around town getting paid to do music and put on shows and do all this stuff. And so we headed that up as 5th graders and was making a lot of money doing that for 5th graders. And honestly, we would have probably continued that for a lot longer into college. But one of our hammered dulcimer wasn't like super passionate about music. He just liked making the money. So by college, he didn't care to do it anymore. But so always kind of was doing little things like that. And I laugh now that I do podcasting because I also, like as a kid, I don't even know how I figured it out, but I had just an old tape radio box.
Yeah.
Now I had that, and I like would pretend to be this like show host. This
was
DJ.
it like the play school thing with the microphone attached to the?
Yeah, I don't even know if I had. There must have been.
that.
There must have been a mic because like you could put a tape in, and I figured out the record button, and so I made it like I was a radio DJ, and so like I'd let music play for a while, and then I'd have my segment. I don't even remember what I talked about. And, I had this whole show going on that was completely pretend, but real for me. And so it's just funny that now my mom still has those tapes. It's so embarrassing to hear myself, but I just went all in, which I loved. I was just all in about it. Thought it was the coolest thing. And so was always kind of like that. So then the only problem was the community I grew up in, which has so many pluses to it, was very family focused. Love that kind of stuff. Very God-centered. However, there was definitely sort of a box of like what was considered okay or promoted avenues, say for career success. Like if your big dream fit into those parameters, go you, support all that. But if you kind of ventured outside of that, then it wasn't supported. People thought, well, that's not for you. And there was a lot of kind of really dream squashing basically around that stuff. So what started to happen as I got into like middle school and then high school is I just kind of kept getting my dreams dampened. These areas that I kind of felt drawn to weren't considered real things to other people.
I can relate.
Right. So then I just kind of started gradually getting steered to the things that were okay and started trying to figure out how to make my skill sets fit in that box. So medicine was definitely highly promoted in that community. And so I was always told that I was a great coach, that I was really good at motivating people to do things they didn't think they could do. And I was good at giving loving love, but then tough love and like pushing you past your limits and all this stuff. So people are like, you'd be a great physical therapist because they kind of have to do that with their patients. They're hurting, you got to push them to their limits. But then also, so I started down that route. And through college, I was a personal trainer. I started out working for the college I was at in 2008, but then most of my clients weren't members there. And so I was going to their homes or doing things elsewhere. And I was like, I would just make more money doing this for myself. So then I decided to kind of rent a space from where my dad had his business and train people from there. So I did that through college while going to school to do physical therapy. But then as I finished undergrad, after I did all the shadowing hours involved for physical therapy, I really loved when therapists got to work with the amputees. I just loved the stories, the level of connection between the therapist and the patient was a little more intense because a bigger life change, and trying to figure out, okay, how do we get you back to life and creating something beautiful from whatever's just happened to you? And so I loved that level of connection and involvement. The training was in there too, and that physical wise. And so I loved that. And I started then researching if there was a way I could just do that as a physical therapist. And there really wasn't. And then I happened to have a friend who was pre-physical therapy as well, but switched to what's called orthotics and prosthetics. And it's not something a lot of people have heard about, but it's its own specific niche of practitioner. So how there's like nurse practitioner, there's that level, but for orthotics and prosthetic focused. So then I started shadowing that at the same time, and it was just a lot more fun. It was a lot more hands-on. you got to not only like make the plan as the practitioner, but then implement the plan. And so you got that patient relationship. You didn't just kind of hand it off to like a physical therapy assistant to implement your plan. So I just loved that. So I switched and did that, went to graduate school for that in California. And I met my husband through training before I left in 2010 is when I first met Kellen. But then we didn't start dating until 2 years later. So I definitely moved back and did my residency here, and we got married in 2014. And he was a full-time personal trainer. So then it worked out because I still, all through grad school, continued my own personal training business, but I shifted it to online. So I could still do school and be doing things. So again, I always had this entrepreneur thing going on, even while pursuing these other more accepted versions of my skill sets. So he and I blended our business into what we call Oldham Strong today. And so I did residency, all that stuff, work here in Chattanooga as a practitioner. When I had our first child, Malia, then I was able to, because I was still doing Oldham Strong with Kellen on the side, on top of doing the practitioner thing, I was able to just go back to work part-time and not have to go back full-time, which I loved. Because I love my practitioner job. I do love that. It's the kind of patient interaction I love. That's how I've been able to coach and work in mindset with over 25,000 people on top of the training. But now it's great because I do want to be with my girls. I do want to be able to make my own schedule in that way. So I'm able to still do that, but then also continue to build our own business, which now has not only training, but personal development sides too. The events that we'll talk about later, the podcast, and these other aspects of the business that I'm really passionate about now. And so that's where for Kellen and I, he kind of runs mainly the personal training stuff. I do online clients and a couple in selective in-person people like fitness competitors and stuff. But I'm really building our personal development side, the podcast, events, speaking engagements, those kinds of things, which is what I'm really passionate about, and realized now later in life, that's what I'd always been passionate about doing. But that wasn't a thing, especially back then. It's a lot more accepted now, but especially back then, you didn't go think that could be a profession to motivate people and inspire people through whether it's a podcast or speaking on stages or whatever, that wasn't something you could even be considered successful or lucrative financially. And it totally is. So when you finally ditch that and ignore what people think, it's really amazing what you can achieve. So that's what we're doing now today.
Okay. Well, yeah, I love that, because the whole reason I created this podcast was basically to question our conditioning that we were raised with as middle-class children, that, if you're not a doctor or an attorney or, I don't know, work in insurance, that basically you probably won't make a whole lot of money. It's like the whole starving artist kind of complex.
Right.
And so I wanted to show others that, no, that's not true. There are ways, and especially because of the internet, I think that's really just opened the gates.
Oh, yeah.
But so much of what I try to teach is just questioning the status quo and these mainstream messages that I don't believe are serving us anymore. I think the world has changed so drastically. So it's all about questioning the mainstream paradigm. Have you had instances throughout your journey where you started to pick up on that and question it, and it ended up really boosting you further than if you would have just stayed in that typical, like, more masculine, hustle-driven type of mentality? Have you been able to tap into more of your like feminine, intuitive, like heart-centered space, and that ended up being a lot more effective than what everybody else, all the experts preach?
Yes, definitely. I would say like one of the biggest, cultural, how did you phrase it? It was so good. The
status quo.
The status quo. Yeah.
Hustle culture.
Yeah. So one of the first things that kind of hit me later on, after I had finished residency and all this stuff, actually, it probably hit me the biggest after we'd had our first daughter, because I knew that I wanted to stay home, and I had a way to do that. And I knew I could take that to all new levels that people in the past would say wasn't possible. But so that was the first thing, conditioning that I decided to just go ahead and chuck to the wind, was this concept that extraordinary success in ways that you wouldn't imagine is for everybody. Like, if that's what you want to do, if you're following your calling, which is what I felt like intuitively, I felt God calling me into these different directions that, maybe to the usual culture that I grew up in wasn't considered a real job or a real thing or of value. I knew deep down was where I'd been called to be all this time. And I'm just trying to fit it in these other boxes. That it is for anybody, as long as you're willing to pursue it. It's not like it won't take work. It's not like it's not going to take hustle and whatever time space you decide to like schedule that in for yourself. It's going to take hard work, but it's for you. Like, and it doesn't matter if you want to be an artist or do you want to be an actress or do you want to be, because that's kind of things like, so what hit me when you said that was, there's this story of when I was 6 years old. So I always had this desire to like be on a stage, like to make people feel something. So didn't know. And that's where I tell people, like, look back to your childhood. If you're still trying to figure out what your calling might be or what your gifts are, like look back in your childhood before people tainted you just yet, because those are a lot of times where what God put in you naturally was there until the devil decided to send people in to start pushing you other ways and burying that seed so it wouldn't flourish into what it was supposed to be. And so anyway, so I didn't know exactly how this was going to turn out. So, but I wanted to be an actress. And I told my dad, I was like, I want to be an actress. And I actually had the ability to do it because my uncle is a Hollywood director and producer. He's won an Oscar. He has all this stuff. So I had the ability and the connections for this to be a potential, or at least to go try. And I remember it's like probably one of the first memories that I actually even have, like as a child, is he said, no, Gina, you can't go be an actress because actresses have to sleep with the directors for parts. I was sick. And so, but no, and don't go hating on my dad. Cause again, stuff that his, generation had been like, so then if I would have known at 6, I wish I could have told that 6-year-old, like if I was in her body, I could say, well, then I guess I'll just have to go become the freaking director then. And I'll just have to write my own movies. I'll have to write my own, roles and star my own thing. And that's how I'll do it. And I'll make it a space for other women that don't want to have to do that to feel like they can have their shot at success. Right. Because why not? And we've seen today. Now, what he said wasn't, this is the key, is what he said wasn't necessarily untrue. Like, as we found out today, that with the Me Too movement, that was something happening. That wasn't not happening. But the difference is the mindset shift to say, especially if you're a parent to your children, this is something I'm very hyper focused on now. It's like, why not you? Okay, you want to go be an actress? This is something that could be happening. You can be real if you want with the 6-year-old say, but guess what? You could change that. You could go change it, but you'll have to really stand your ground. You'll teach your kids, like, your dream is still possible. And you might have to make something new happen in an industry where it's not happening, but go for it. If anybody can do it, you can. Like, putting belief in people instead of doubt is where we need to shift things. And so that's the status quo I started to finally question, is like, why not me? Now, obviously I don't want to be an A-list celebrity now, I don't want paparazzi to follow me. But I'm on a stage now. I'm on all kinds of stages. Like, it was still the right gift. I was just figuring out where it went. And it's okay to follow where it goes. It's okay for your kids to follow where those dreams go, because God's going to lead it the right direction, but having faith in yourself, if you're obviously talking to yourself now or in your own kids, as to like, why not you to go do that big thing? If you're willing to work for it, you're willing to follow the path and do the pivots necessary, and you're going to stay connected to what God's telling you to do and where to go and what gifts to grow, it's for you. Just go for it. So that's something I've questioned for sure. And it's proved highly successful once I just got on the right path and stopped trying to follow everybody else's version of their dream for me. It's a lot harder to move forward if you're just following somebody else's dream for yourself, as opposed to doing what God put in you to do in the first place.
Yeah, it seems like the journey, the big journey, the self-development journey, the entrepreneurial journey is really at the core unlearning all of these self-limiting beliefs. And it wasn't even necessarily our fault. And it wasn't necessarily our parents' fault, because it was passed on. It was kind of like a generational, ancestral kind of trauma in a sense, I think. So yeah, I like that a lot.
Because like my dad is an entrepreneur, and he's the first one to really, and his family have gone to the level, like super successful entrepreneur, multimillionaire entrepreneur. So it wasn't that he didn't even have similar beliefs, but again, it's hard. And in that time, people weren't taught. It was in the normal box though. It was business. He created a human resource development business. Right? So that was still in this particular community considered a thing. Okay, so you're a business owner of a brick and mortar, and this is what it does.
Yeah, like it's real.
It was still a real thing. So then it was out of the box for me to then multiple times in my life to want to do something that seemed kind of airy, like, oh, you're going to go be a coach or motivational speaker. And so again, people like, well, Tony Robbins was, and that's that same era, but people are like, well, that's Tony though, that like, you couldn't go be the next Tony, but like, well, why not though? Right. So that's what we had to shift. Is like, he was just sort of this outlier, or, people like him. And so that's where we had to change that. And that side, like, he got there somehow, it just might be a little, so it's interesting how it would pick and choose, like, well, he is a real thing and he is a life coach and he is an author and obviously extremely successful, but he was just a fluke. But
yeah,
he's not
a fluke. Yes. That's what it seems like when I would ever express that sort of interest as a child, oh, that was just the exception to the rule,
Exactly.
And so that's what I found, that most of my misery throughout my teenage years, I was a very troubled teen, was because I was denying, like you said, those seeds that were planted in you.
Mm-hmm.
So as a life coach, what have you noticed among your clients is there like a recurring theme, like a major block that you have noticed, or limiting beliefs that you notice from your clients?
Mm-hmm. So I would say the biggest one, because especially the people I work with I mostly work with the women, and a lot of them are moms, but regardless, even if they're not moms, but is their concept of time. But then for them to realize, like, they don't have time, but linking the fact that they don't have time with their level of value of themselves. Because the reality is, we'll say with my workout programs, for example, because it's just an easy example. So if I wrote the program for your kid and the kid needed to be supervised for his or her 30-minute workout, and then they needed to go do some form of like cardiovascular exercise, whether it's a walk or whatever, for 20 or 30 minutes, and I needed them to do that 3 times a week each, would it happen? Of course it'd be on your schedule, because it's your kid. If your kid's in the program, you're going to make it happen. You're going to move things around. Like, you're going to move mountains so that your kid can accomplish the goal of how they want to feel, how they want to look. You're going to do whatever you can do to make it happen. But if it's just for you, well, all of a sudden you don't have time. So then what that means is you're just not important enough to yourself, which is a hard thing for people to swallow, because that's the reality. Like, you'll move the mountains for everybody else but you. Why is that? Well, then you're not important enough to yourself. So as soon as you can refigure out how to value who you are, and that you deserve to have 30 minutes to do something to make you feel better on a cellular level, to wake up your mind, to input into yourself, so you can go do all these other things you're already doing at a much higher level because you are healthy. Like, that's the starting point. And that's usually a big hurdle for people to conquer in the beginning, because they do have to have a self-reflection of, they thought they were self-confident, or they thought they didn't have worth issues, or they thought, but it was just misdirected with a band-aid to say, well, I just care so much about these other people, or I'm just so busy taking care of these other people. Well, at the end of the day, that's on you. And you also do have to take responsibility to say, that is on me. I can fix it, but do you want to fix it? And if you really want to fix it, then you've got to associate giving yourself even that tiny bit of time, that you're worthy of that time. And then if you're worthy of that time, then you need to go talk to your spouse. You need to talk to your babysitter, whoever you need to make it happen with, to give yourself that time. And you'll do all of those things if it was for somebody else. Like, if it's for your kid, you're going to talk to whoever you got to talk to and ask whatever favors you got to do, because they're worth it to you. So now you just got to be worth it to you to make the same accommodations. And that's usually a big breakthrough for people. They're like, oh yeah, I actually do have time to do this. I just got to be important enough to me to put it into my schedule like I do everything else.
And how do you ever have the mom guilt yourself, because you do have so much going on? You've got a day job, but then you are showing up for all of the callings in your heart, and you just had a baby, your second child. So if anybody had any excuses for a like inconvenient phase of their life, I would think you could totally have all these excuses. But the first question, so do you get the mom guilt, and how do you reconcile that ever? Like, why can't I just be happy just being that mom that gives up everything for the children? Because sometimes I still haven't completely gotten through it, but I've made great strides. But I think it's like a little monster that still kind of rears its ugly head sometimes for me. So the mom guilt thing.
Yeah.
And then the second part would be how, well, let's start with the mom guilt thing.
Okay. So yes, I think it's something that won't ever go away, just because you just do love your kids so much. And like, you really would love to just spend I really would love to spend all my time with my kids. However, though, I do know that, again, like, I do have persistent dreams and aspirations inside. And the biggest thing that I think of to then put the voice to rest is, if I'm going to tell my girls, hey, go pursue your dreams and create your dream life, the very first thing they're going to do is see if I did that. We're their first example. So how are they going to ever take my advice to go pursue their dreams and just really go for it, work hard and create their dream life for their future family or for themselves or whatever, if I'm not doing it? That's going to be the first question. Well, are you, Mom? Did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd have to say no if I didn't, right? So that's something that I put into my mind, whether it's for the exercise or for the entrepreneurial stuff that I'm doing. I definitely plan things so that it doesn't cross over as much as possible with if I'm trying to spend time with them. It does, it's never going to be perfect. You still might have to.
Yeah, that was like the second part that I wanted to ask you, is kind of like, how do you manage that? How do you balance that? The whole mom thing with the day job and then the passions that you're.
Yeah. So like the practitioner days so again, like, I've got it as much planned out as I can, but then obviously you'll have to pivot just depending on life. But so Monday, Wednesday, Friday is when I'm at my practitioner job. And so on those days, my 3-year-old's now in pre-K 3. So she gets to now, that's her fun extra activity day, because she doesn't have to go every day, which she's fortunate. So those are kind of fun days. She gets to go play with her group of friends. She feels like it's a cool play date, so she gets to go do this extra fun activity on those 3 days of the week. And then my youngest is home with Kellen's mom. And so, of course, she's still 11 months. So she's just having fun all the time. So that's her thing. And then on the other days, so like Tuesday, Thursday, and, I do as an entrepreneur, like, you do stuff through the weekends, even if it's not like a bunch of hours set, you may still be sending messages or emails like here and there. But so Tuesday, Thursday, let's say, for my other days, I wake up every day, Monday through Friday at 5 a.m. so I can get our Oldham Strong business stuff. I get basically 2 hours before either kid's awake. And then if it's a Tuesday or Thursday, so I'm home, we're all home, then I'll have another set of time when they're napping. Like, Malia's obviously the most aware. So I'll wait to do some more like really looking at stuff when she's down, and Sailor, I'll kind of have to multitask a little bit if I really have to get stuff done. And then after they go to bed, I'll do a little bit more. And Malia's kind of been in a phase where she wants me in the room till she falls asleep. And it's just less of a battle if I just stay in there, but she's got a bunk bed. So she'll go up on the top and I'll sit underneath. And since I'm underneath, I can do work on my computer or phone until I can hear her breathing's heavy, and then I'll go out. So I've planned those work periods. And then she knows, like, I just phrase things. If I have to send a text, or if I can't get something I need done and it has to get done and they're awake, I'll just tell her. She's like, hey, Mommy, I would say, hey, Malia, do you want to see this banner that I'm creating for the event I've got coming up? Do you want to see? I just include them in when I do. I don't just say, I've got to work, leave me alone. I'm like, hey, look at this banner that Mommy's creating because we're doing this speaking event. Like, she loves, like, she's gonna be my little business girl because she just loves to do all my work with me. Like, she's more upset to miss out on it. But so I'll just kind of include her and just let her know this is what I'm working on. And I'll try to be nice, but like, I've got to focus on this real quick. I've got to send this client, a thing. And so, I mean, like, in her little mind, she'll say to herself now that she's got clients and she's got stuff. And so she'll like pretend to do her own stuff, which again, for me, I'm like, she won't probably remember a lot anyways at this age. But what will stick is that Mommy is pursuing her dreams. And yet I spend plenty of focused time playing. Like, there's definitely all those other hours in the day that the phone is away and we're just playing and doing her things, or we're going to swimming. Like, there's plenty of time that she gets 100% focused, and so does Sailor. So they are aware of all of that. And kids don't really even need a lot of time. For them, 15 minutes feels like hours,
Yeah,
so
someone told me that like a child therapist, when I was going through a really hard time right after my second child, and I had the marketing job and I was getting my blog off the ground, and like I would prop feed the baby. I know the doctors say not to do that, but I get a pillow and like prop the bottle up while I'm trying to work. And I felt horrible. And I was talking to a friend and she was like, a child therapist that we had to go to said, 15 minutes a day with individual attention with each child is really all they need.
Right.
And so that made me feel so much better, because I had all these ideas of who I was going to be as a mom, especially when you form your career around being home with your children. There is that weird, like, you don't know when you're on or off kind of to navigate. But yeah, I like just 15 minutes.
Right. And they're obviously getting, and that's where I know, like, they're getting way more than that. They're getting hours of focus. So then that's where I'm like, this is a good balance, that as they grow up and as you can even talk with them more, they're just going to see like, hey, mommy's doing and daddy's doing big things. And we also get to play. And so that's just something that it's going to really stick through to them. And they like to be involved in the things we're doing too. So again, I have a motherhood segment of the podcast, and that's one of the segments. If Malia walks in, it's not a big deal, and she'll sit here, and be part of it. So like showing her, especially if she decides to have kids one day, I'm excited because she'll know that mommy did that and that like she can totally do it. So if anything, I just really wanting to like share to this next generation stuff that maybe we didn't get to help them grow.
So personally, I was raised in a very like hellfire and brimstone kind of church. And so for many years, that really put a bad taste in my mouth. And I went in other directions. Always deep down though, like when times get hard, I always want to go back to Jesus, but I'm open to other religions, and I try to be mindful of maybe the trauma those kinds of like really dogmatic churches did put on other people. So a lot of times I don't want to scare people off. So I might refer to God as source, God, what have you. But my goal is that people don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's so much really good scripture in the Bible. And what I love, I was recently listening to one of your podcasts where you broke down one of your devotionals. So Gina just did a 30-day free devotional, and she was breaking down one of them. And what I loved is you referred to scripture from the Bible, but you were able to find the link between basically like the principles of the Bible with the law of attraction, because the law of attraction is really what set me further on my self-development journey and on my entrepreneurial journey. So I actually had thought about doing a whole podcast just talking about how the Bible and the law of attraction actually go together. Because sometimes, I guess when you've got a lot of that dogmatic, like everything is evil, maybe that's witchcraft, or maybe that's evil, wizardry or something, that sometimes you can feel weird about exploring other ideas and perspectives. So I am not well versed enough with the scripture to just start dropping it and finding the parallels and showing that for other people. But I didn't know if you would mind maybe elaborating more on that, since you've got a whole devotional series.
Yeah. So I would say so the 30-day devotional came about just because I'm creating this event I've got this event that's in November, helping people to clarify their calling and step into their purpose. So creating the life you want. What do you want? And delving into that. So then this was a freebie to kind of help even like prepare people's souls that are coming, or just to help people that aren't coming in a similar fashion. Obviously, the event goes on a deeper dive, but the devotional itself goes plenty deep on all kinds of repertoires. And so to create the life you want, which is basically what the law of attraction is about, that what you think in your mind and what you believe in your mind is what ends out being lived out in your life, whether it's good or bad. So really assess your thinking and look at your life and see like, okay, how can I change what's happening in my life with my mind first? And so for me, this really, I mean, it's to me, and for me personally, the law of attraction is something that's created by God. We've just given it a name now, as far as like this connection between when we have belief and faith in something, put action to it, and then we get the desire that we want, the outcome that we want, or even better than we could have wanted. And this happens because for me, God is the foundation. He is the source of everything. He created everything. So the law of attraction is a science. You know, they've definitely tested that animals, humans, or the earth, everything on the planet that we know has a frequency that it functions at, which is why the sun goes round at certain times and the moon comes. Is like why the animals, you know, go to sleep and how they attract to their mates, and all, like everything is interconnected scientifically. So for me, I feel God created that. He made that be so that the world would function, and we are part of that. We're not separate from that. The key is, I say there's kind of 3 steps if you want to really implement the law of attraction for yourself. And this is how it comes and was created from scripture, starting at creation. But so it's to recognize the supernatural connection, and so get connected to that source. So that's through scripture. So to start seeing the law of attraction at work, you want to get in sync with everything that's going on. And to do that, I feel like if you get into the scriptures, the key is you're going to start recognizing what God's voice sounds like. It doesn't mean voice. It means your intuition to picking up on things in the world around you. If it's a song that communicates something to you and creates your breakthrough, it's the event you feel called to go to and somebody told you about it. You know, those little sequences that for me aren't accidental. And you start actually picking up on those happening in your life more as you're actually in tune with what he's trying to tell you through everything he's got going on around you anyways. And so spending time in the scriptures helps you to catch those things easier and raise your awareness to like, okay, so you've prayed for something or asked for something. We get busy doing that part, the ask, and then we just kind of move on with our busy life and don't do the listening part. And again, the listening doesn't mean like just with your ears. It's like keeping an eye out for the opportunity. If you're wanting to go do that thing, keep an eye out for the opportunity to get you to that thing, and you're gonna catch it and see it and get to that thing faster and sooner because you're on the lookout, you're aware of it. So that's kind of the first step is, and so it's very interesting how when you do start to read in scriptures more, it doesn't matter what you're reading. It doesn't have to be some breakthrough Bible study. It could just be a short devotional thing. Like, for example, like
that's what I do. So I don't read the Bible, but I do get devotionals. And so
that are based off of, which is what the one I wrote, it just has basically a quote of the day, a verse for the day, and then something I've written to kind of break down the connection of those and to kind of teach a very short paragraph thought for the day for you to take. And so those are all really great because those still tie in. So like that one I messaged you today, Erica's speaking at my event, and as an introvert, that makes her nervous.
So synchronistic.
And so she was so nervous. Yeah. She had told me that the day before, and I had things in my own head. I'm like, I'm busy, like planning this whole event and getting sponsors and selling tickets to do it. How I'm going to have time to even make my keynote, speech. And so I had those going in my head. And then I just opened the Bible I have has devotionals built into it, just on certain pages. And so the one that I had opened to randomly that day was literally saying like, it doesn't even matter what you say in your speech. It like literally said that it doesn't matter what you say in your speech. It's what God's going to say through you. And it linked with the Bible verse that said that, and so that I sent the picture to Erica, which was exactly what she needed to hear.
Yeah. It was like, guys, literally the night before I was freaking out because I am going to be a keynote speaker at Gina's event, November 5th. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my biggest fear. What am I doing? I've lost my mind. I started having like a panic attack that night. And I kind of voiced that to Gina. And then she texts me that scripture the next morning. And I was like, of course. And what I love about that particular passage is that I'm such a it's all about the vibe, the frequency that you emit. And so I could see how that passage would be. You could also link it back to just the vibration or your frequency of what you are delivering to your audience. Is not necessarily
Right.
the eloquence and your words, because
Right.
gosh, I get so in my head. I have horrible like memory word recall, but it's soothing because it's more about the energy that you are bringing, like the frequency you're bringing
Right.
to your audience,
Yeah.
and
And that
not,
verse literally said, like it said, literally, don't even worry about fancy words is what it said.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why I was like, I sent it to her and I was like, so those are the things you start to pick up on. And as far as just even giving people scriptures, like that's an example of, there was this one, and I looked it up this morning just so I could tell you on it, but it's a little story. I like to look for the stories because that's what we connect to the most, is like stories. And so like in 2 Kings, there's a story about the prophet Elisha, and there's this king that's after him because he's been helping Israel. And so the king, and he feels like if he can get Elisha, who's this prophet that's helping Israel, that then he'll finally be able to take Israel out. So he's after him, and Elijah has a servant who's freaking out because this army is just outside. They're on this hilltop, and the army's out there. You can see them. They're just covering the hills. And so he's freaking out. And Elijah's like, says this prayer and says, Lord, open his eyes, talking about the servant, so that he can see, because Elisha wasn't nervous at all. And so then it says, and the Lord opened his eyes and gave him supernatural vision. And then he could see that the hills were covered with horses and chariots of fire. So Elisha wasn't worried because he had supernatural vision to see God's army was greater than this one already in front of him. And so that kind of stuff is happening for us all the time. Again, it's just, we got to get in tune to that is happening and to look for those things. And then magic happens, like this verse, to calm you, to help you not freak out and not continue going for this opportunity that's totally for you. And it just already told you, you don't need the fancy words. It literally said, you don't need the fancy words because it's about what I'm going to do, not what you're going to do, is what the verse said. And so those kind of cool things will start happening. So I'd say that's the first part, is, figuring out, getting connected, becoming aware, start looking for the law of attraction in the world around you. And then I always say, step two is that, or step two is that you then have to have really big belief, which is what that particular devotional was about. You have to have big belief and big faith that what you're seeing is for you, and to go for it. And then the more steps you take in that faith and belief towards something, the miracles happen, and that thing you were hoping for comes about. And so that particular devotional that I was reading was a direct example that I think God purposely gives us of the law of attraction, where Jesus was saying, the story I told in that devotional was that he says in this verse, Mark 11:24, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. So then I brought up the story of where Jesus raised Lazarus from the death, and he, before he did any miracle, said out loud, Father, thank you for hearing me. And then he told the people, I'm only saying this out loud so you know what I'm about to do. And then he told Lazarus to come out, and he did. So he believed what was going to happen before he even did it, and it happened. So that level of belief, calling it to pass, like thanking God already for providing what you need to get to that thing. I've got this event. There's a lot of things I'm doing I don't know how to do. Getting people, like I've never had to get or gotten sponsors for an event before. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just taking the next step and know that I've got this piece that he's going to make it all fit. So I'm just here to show up and let all the things come that are supposed to. And that's what happens. So you do have to just have that level of faith, even if it's small faith. And I talked about in that particular episode, even if you don't believe, like all you need to believe is that in him, because he believes in you as your just baseline. So just start there. And then as you start seeing confirmations of these things coming to you, the Bible, the devotionals sent to you that like are confirmation, okay, I'm supposed to still speak at this event. It's not about my fancy words. I can do this. Like those start giving you increased confidence to take your belief up to the next level. So then you can do even bigger things. And another story, just because I know you were kind of curious, just other Bible verses that represent the like bringing about of the law of attraction or examples of it is, and a lot of them are put on by Jesus, which is cool because again, he's God for me who created everything. So he's teaching us way back then, like, here's some things you can implement to create magic in your life. If you're willing to believe enough. And so there's two different stories where he is somewhere preaching, and the first one's a nobleman comes to him. He's a father and his son is really sick, and he asked him to come home with him to heal him. And he said, I can't go with you right now. And then the nobleman just said, well, if you'll just speak it, then I know it'll happen. So then Jesus said, your son is healed, go home. And so then he went home, and at the hour that Jesus said that, he was healed. At the hour he said it and the man believed it is when it happened. So he didn't even need the tangible, like, Jesus, you have to come and do this. Like, he had to have the knowing that this is going to happen before it did. And then it came to pass. So, like, just another example of kind of that whole Lazarus thing of you, when you're really willing to have that level of belief and to just step out in faith, a lot of amazing things happen, and the universe brings to you what you need to make that thing come to pass. So whatever that is for you.
And you never know how it's going to come to pass. That's the beautiful thing. Exactly. It's just these little breadcrumbs. And then you look back and reflect over 5 years and you see how it all made sense, even though it didn't really make sense at the moment.
Oh, right. Exactly. Especially for your financial needs. Like, one of my favorite stories is there's 5,000 people listening to Jesus, and they're all hungry and they're way out in the middle of nowhere. And all they had is this kid that brings 2 fish and 5 bread loaves. And they're like, well, this isn't going to feed everybody, is what his disciples are telling him. And he's like, watch what I'm going to do. And again, he thanks God ahead of time. And then they just start pulling off pieces of bread and handing them out and cutting the fish. And it just keeps producing.
Ooh, I love that. For like
5,000 people. And then there was extra baskets left over. So again, it was like, just bring what you have to the table. Even if you feel like nothing, you don't have a lot of skill sets, you don't think you have a lot of gifts, you don't think you have a lot of anything, but here it is. God, I feel like you need it for something, so just show me what to do. And God will multiply. He doesn't need, that's our mistake. It's when we think we have to really like be some powerhouse. He just needs us to show up, and then he'll do the rest, and he'll have the universe send us everything else we need and multiply exponentially, even if you have very little to start with. So,
yeah. And I feel like the more you step through your fears, the more magnetic you are for blessings, because that is just such a testament to your faith.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because then you have even more knowing that, like, you've already seen the evidence now. Like, the hardest part is the first step. Yeah. Then you've had the evidence. So now, even like, especially in entrepreneurship, there's risks that you have to take to really take yourself to the next level. And after you've done it once and you saw how the abundance was sent your way, you're more quickly able to make those risks, calculated, of course, but from your intuition, risks, because you've seen how it's been fruitful in the past.
You've built your trust muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Well, okay. So that brings me to my next question with you is, as an outsider looking in, it just seems like you're not really afraid, to me, because you've competed on national stages in bodybuilding shows, and you seemed like you were such a natural at that. And then you've been in these big rooms, these big events with these high level entrepreneurs and thought leaders. You started a podcast when podcasting still wasn't really that pop. It seems like more and more people are jumping on board, but you started this a few years ago. And then, so you've never done an event yourself, right?
Just smaller workshops. Yeah.
Okay. And now you're just like, okay, now I'm going to throw this speaking event. Have you always been that way, or is it more you just developed the trust muscle? Like, what, to me, you just, especially as an introvert, you just don't seem afraid of like rejection or making a fool of yourself. You're just fearless and you just do it.
Oh no, I'd say definitely like that. It all goes in my head for sure. But then I just choose not to just linger there. I think that's a key for people. It's like how long you want to linger in the fear, and so just move through it. And I definitely always have a strong enough why. So like, whether before into the current like career stuff I'm doing, I was definitely in high level sports, like you said. If I was going to pursue something, I had a reason why I was wanting to do it. And like I said, if I'm going to really go at something, I'm not just going to half-ass it. I'm going to do it at the highest level, which means be really prepared. So one way that I kind of choose to look at fear is that fear isn't a deterrent. Like, I'm not supposed to be there. Like, oh shoot, I'm afraid of this. That means maybe I don't belong here. And this took a little time to develop, because in a lot of, especially new areas, you're kind of inadvertently told by people you don't belong there. In fact, I was told not long ago by somebody that I didn't belong in this space, somebody who I really would have hoped would have not ever said that. But yet, I don't view that as signs I'm not supposed to be somewhere. It's okay, how can I be more prepared then? So if I'm afraid of this thing, say I've got fears around creating this big event that's a size I've not done before, getting sponsors, getting people to show up, this number of people, so it's worth it for the sponsors. Well, I'm afraid of it. I want to do the event. I feel called to do the event. I feel like it's needed for people, so I'm going to do it. Well, so if I'm afraid of it, what can I be more prepared at to be less afraid then? Because that's the solution. You'll be less afraid when you're more prepared. So like, okay, I'm going to start getting in conversations with people who've done this before, find out their tips and tricks and start implementing, and implement immediately and not procrastinate it, even though it makes me uncomfortable or I'm afraid to do it. Because the sooner I do that, I'll be less afraid because I'll know I've got some check boxes going, so I kind of, it started back in doing things like extracurriculars in childhood, like sports or violin. If you're going to have to go into an audition, that's scary, but the more you practice, the better you're going to do and the better prepared you're going to be. And the more times you audition, maybe the first audition you freaked out, you did all this practice and played great outside of it, and then you kind of crashed and burned in the thing. Well, then you just do better the next time, and you just keep putting yourself in these situations to grow, because then every time you come at that again, you're even better and you're more prepared. And so the fear doesn't necessarily go away. It'll just be shorter lived, because the more experience you get under your belt pushing through anyways and getting more prepared anyways, then that fear doesn't stay in there as long, and you just get your focus on preparation instead of drowning in fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's definitely something that had to grow over time. I'd say I was a lot more fearless when I was younger, all the way up until my residency. And then I had a really abusive supervisor for my orthotic residency. And she was very verbally abusive, to the point where somebody actually reported it at the facility. And I was maybe only there 6 months, and they just decided to take her off my schedule. Like, I didn't have to work with her. They just kind of threw me to the sharks, but it was better than being with her, to just see patients on my own and not have to have her supervising me, because it was not a good situation. And so that really took me back in my confidence more than any time in my life, because it was actually a space that I'd entered into where I was being completely vulnerable to learn. Like, I knew I didn't know everything about orthotics. I'm here to learn from you as my mentor. Like, teach me, show me, like I was going, I was not used to somebody thinking you needed to do it perfect the first time. And that's how she was. And then even when I was doing it perfect, it wasn't good enough. She had just had all kinds of issues, but that was a big damage to like me being used to just like, take your shot. The more
I used to be that way too. I had an abusive boss, and I used to be I was a dancer, performer, play guitar, sing, I wasn't afraid to speak in front of people. And I had like two really bad traumatizing experiences that set me back. So,
and then the way I finally moved through that is like, number one, she doesn't care about me being hurt by that, or like, I don't gain anything by letting her win. So I'm not going to let her win. I'm going to go, and then for me, that's also just, if I'm really starting to gain momentum towards God's purpose for me, I can suspect those things are going to start to happen to set me back, because it's, the devil's attempt to slow down the progress. And so then I'm like, okay, I need to push for this even more, because it's the place I'm obviously supposed to be, because it's getting threatening at this point. So that's kind of a sign I see too sometimes. It's like, okay, if you feel especially attacked in a particular area, just go ahead and push a little harder, because you're obviously onto something. And so
okay, you just gave me chills with that, because this has been a very difficult year for me of stepping through a lot of my fears. And that little girl that was raised in that very dogmatic church, as much as I've done the self-development work, there's still that little, oh, am I being punished? Is God punishing me for maybe am I getting too big for my britches? Because it seems like as soon as I broke out and really stepped through those fears, my life kind of went haywire in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no,
I needed to hear that.
No, that's totally what I've just figured out over time is, you'll be coasting along for a little while, and then you really start, going to the next level God's called you to, which is resistance training, and the only way you get bigger muscles is by breaking the muscles down. And so your life just starts to break down, and you're like, what has happened? Was this a mistake? Am I going the wrong way? But you're not going the wrong way. It's just because you got to get bigger muscles to carry the bigger blessing he's about to put on your shoulders.
Ooh, love that.
So that's the way I've started to see it. And you're like, oh, why does this have to be this way? But that's where, again, just the way I feel like he's created the universe, little things like fitness and weight training, those are physical representations of the spiritual things that are happening and required to do the same things that you want to create. Is, you know, maybe a physical goal for weight training, but it's the same thing for a career or entrepreneurial goal or an impact goal, or a, you know, that all of that stuff still takes resistance training in just different ways of your life. So
that's exactly what I needed to hear today. And I think that is what we will end that on. Now I want you to talk about this event going on.
Oh yeah. So this event's going to take place in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's November 5. It goes from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. We've got 4 keynote speakers. I'm one of them. Erica is another one of them. Whitney Weiser Savage is another one. You guys, and I'll, if you follow me, you'll see all these people. I'm posting all of them. And then Raquel Mullins, who also is my sister-in-law, and she also owns the space that we're doing this from. And the goal of this event is just to bring together other driven women who feel called to live extraordinary lives, and they really want to step into their calling or the next level of their calling. So maybe they don't have any clue what it is. We're going to work you through that, how to help figure out what you feel called to do, what your gifts are, create vision for yourself if you don't feel like you have one, hone in your identity if you feel like you've lost that, so you can step into your calling. Or if maybe you feel like you found it, but you need to either step into the next level, or you really need to just get to bringing it to life at this point, and you just need some guidance there, or you need the mindset work to break through some of these things we've been talking about, to actually bring it to life, and realize that we at this event believe in you. And so this is a place to like reignite your fire, get you out of a rut, get you out from being stagnant, and inspire you and give you tools to really take your life to the next level. And it's also a place, if maybe you've got all of that down, you just like community. I feel like two things people really lack is clarity or community. Like for both of us in our stories, like even young, we really had a lot of clarity, but our downfalls, we didn't have the community. So I want to catch people wherever you are in your journey, and you can come to this event and know that the people there are wanting to do the things you're doing, in the sense of up-level their lives, create a ripple effect through the impact they create. They just want to make a difference. And there's your tribe right there. If you didn't have a tribe, come here and you'll have it. From the speakers to the women that are attending, you'll finally have that network. And also, maybe you don't know what next step to take. It wasn't about necessarily the step. It was who did you need to meet? And a lot of the people I needed to meet to say break into the podcast world were people that I got in the room with, and we met, and now we took each other to the next level from this. Or fitness competing. You and I met there. Yeah. Here we are working together later. So you just don't know. And same with Whitney Weiser Savage. She and I met years ago, over 10 years ago now, at a fitness competition, didn't know each other at all, connected at this event, and now we've done so many great things together later. So coming just to even meet maybe that next person that's your breakthrough or your community is also a huge thing. You don't have to have your own business. If you do, know that your business will be taken up to the next level by coming. If you don't have a business or care to have one, your life will just be taken up to the next level from this event. So that's what it's for. And again, it's located in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You can get your early bird tickets up through September 17.
And I'm going to put a link in the show notes for that. So just give me the link and I'll put it in.
And then I'll also, because I'll be on other podcasts talking about the event too, as I'm going to create for the podcast I'm on a specific discount code for those listeners. So I'll get that to you, and you can announce it later on other episodes. Like that it's available and what it is for them to go take advantage of it. But this early bird price is the cheapest that it will ever be, but the discount code will obviously be cheaper than like the full price. So take advantage as soon as you can. If you just even think you want to be in this room, take that leap, because it's going to be 4 hours of speaking sessions. There's workbooks and exercises you guys are going to go through, and then a 30-minute live Q&A. Of course, meals are provided, and networking and talking and all that stuff. And I've talked to two of the speakers. Erica and I are going to talk Thursday, I think, about like what she's going to talk about. But two of the speakers I've already talked to, and it's just going to be so powerful, you guys. Like, I'm glad I'm talking after my sister-in-law before my sister-in-law, because her story just like brings me to tears. And so there's just be so much for you guys in this from each of these speakers. It's just going to be so good. Erica's going to just make such an impact. I'm excited for y'all to meet her in person. I'm sure a lot of your listeners can't wait to finally meet you in person. So we'd love to see y'all there at the Abundance Formula event. Clarify your calling, step into your purpose.
Okay. And where can everybody find you, Gina?
So I'm mainly on Instagram, spelled Jeana Oldham, Oldham. So Gina_Oldham. Our business page on Instagram is Oldham Strong. Again, I post most of my stuff on my personal page just because that's where it's just easy to do one thing. But then Facebook, we're on there mainly as Oldham Strong. I am on my personal page some, but mostly Oldham Strong for Facebook, and then for Instagram, my personal account with Gina_Oldham.
Okay, Gina. Well, thank you so much for walking me through my first attempt to host a podcast. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but she was very patient with me. So thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be speaking with you in November.
Yes, I can't wait. You're doing awesome. I'm glad you continue to push through your fears and show up to show introverts they can do it. I'll say half of the speakers are all introverts, you guys. So
okay, so there's no excuses, guys.
Nope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for stopping by this week. I make no money from this podcast, so the best way you can pay it forward is by leaving the show a 5-star review, sharing it with a friend, or even screenshotting this episode on your phone, uploading it to your Insta story, and tagging me in it at Designing Vibes. Sending you my love.